which is in the Celtic West. Probably know a little bit about it yourself anyway. And so that's one of the Celtic nations. It's one of the actual other nations in the UK. And because of we're on the Celtic Sea and we're also surrounded by valleys and mountains in Wales, it basically rains almost every day. At some point in the day, it will rain, and the sky is 70% overcast for the entire year. So it's kind of a light grey or a dark grey. It's always, usually, you don't always get sunny, but it's like that.
Yeah.
So I always dreamed of the sun. I always wanted the sun. Married a Middle Eastern lady. Had 11 years going to like a volcanically steaming hot country every year.
Really?
And
Yeah.
realized, I'm just going to face it. I'm a Celt. I'm pale ale. I'm not meant for that kind of heat and that kind of temperature. And I'm over it. I'm over the heat. I don't desire it. I don't look for it any longer. And that's
Yeah.
just where I am. Now, you're in Wisconsin, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm right up
Okay.
here. I'm 13 minutes away by driving to Bray Road.
I saw that on your bio that you're investigating the Bray
Yeah. Yeah.
well, which is and the Kettle Moraine. That's obviously sort of like a wilderness in that area. Is that
Oh
right?
yes. Yep. It's what the during the Ice Age, what created the Great Lakes,
Oh wow.
the remaining, well, you'd say ice caps or whatever, melting back, pulling back, actually left grooves
Uh-huh.
within this part of Wisconsin, which Wisconsin's not mountain. It doesn't have mountains like the Pacific Northwest or even the East Coast. Not the East Coast, but like
The
Georgia,
Adirondacks.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
all these in Kentucky. But they are 300-foot dips,
Okay.
and it kind of resembles what looks like a kettle, and that's where you get
Okay.
the kettle moraine, because it's
I
yeah,
see.
so
And it's heavily forested. These gentle dips.
heavily forest, very
Okay.
dense, and
Wow.
it goes up from it's about a 40-minute drive from where I'm at here, but it goes up, and I don't do kilometers, so I will say it goes 150 miles
I do
up
miles.
through.
So,
Yeah, oh,
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
150 miles up through the state of Wisconsin before it hits the Great North Woods, and that's
Okay.
like Rhinelander, Eagle River. Then that will break off out of Wisconsin into Michigan, and it's just so there's
Okay.
definitely I see a green path or something,
I mean,
that they could actually follow. Yeah,
talking about green corridors, that's more than a corridor, right?
yeah.
That's an arena. It's
It's an arena. It is.
it's an arena. I mean, we talk about green corridors here, and what we're literally talking about is an actual corridor. Railway sidings, which are very heavily wooded, rivers, dry rivers, things that seem to run all over the UK, and every single city and town that we have here, you've only got to step half a mile out, and you're in the countryside. In every instance, you're in the countryside for miles and miles, and most people aren't out and about walking in those bits of the countryside. We go to specific areas, and there are very few hunters because not many of us carry guns. And there are
Hmm.
places you can go to shoot pheasant and grouse, and there are other people that carry small arms to hunt rabbits and things like that. But generally speaking, we don't have um, an army of people that are boots on the ground for their own enjoyment out there in the woods hunting or traversing in that way. So it's always reassured me that okay, there is a space, and plus there's the lack of human occupation of these semi-wilderness places that we have.
Hmm.
But it's not the same thing with the US. What I noticed when I was there, even landing in places like Atlanta, it was just forest as far as the eye could see, for as far as the horizon. In fact, I noticed that at the airport, and I wasn't expecting forest in Atlanta.
Hmm.
Um, it was a strange thing, and I think that for a lot of British people, it's deceiving the US. We're familiar with it. We have this sort of relatability between the cultures, or we feel like we know each other. I think we feel like we know you guys more because of movies and things.
Hmm.
Um, and yet we just don't actually understand the sheer vastness of the place. And
Right, right.
Wisconsin, I mean, that
Yeah.
that that really. goes along with that, right? Tell me a little
It,
bit about the area.
right. And I always say that even me here living in the United States, I've actually personally have never been to the Pacific Northwest. I know people have been. You can actually study it by Google Maps or the satellites or just what you can read about and learn about. But I've never physically been there. And my younger nephew, said this was a couple of years ago. He flew out to Washington State,
Wow.
from Wisconsin, and he said, because he's gone out with me into the Kettle Moraine, and
Hmm.
that looks immense. He goes, Jay, you have no idea. He goes, it's just miles and miles and miles in a plane, to where it's just
Mm.
nothing but vastness. Where I don't think any human has ever covered every square inch of these areas. That's how vast it is.
Well, on that point, actually, I was listening to an interview with Russell Accord,
Hmm.
um, Expedition Bigfoot, the other day, and he was talking about flying over that area and being told by, I don't know if it was the pilot or somebody involved in the journey, that planes have gone down there in that forest that they've never found.
They've never found, correct. It's like,
Jets,
yeah, it's like
passenger planes.
yeah, it's like a plane going down in the ocean, not
Yeah,
being able to track exactly where it's at. It's
yeah.
that vast. It's
Wow.
crazy.
I mean, we've got no comprehension of that really, and I think one of the problems I always have with cryptozoology is it's easy to imagine the Yeti in the Himalayas or the orang pendek.
Hmm.
Um, and the reason for that is it's easy to conceive of something on the edge of plausibility in the far away and distant from you. And the US that has that aspect to it too. But of course, there's a difficulty with belief even in that country in the possibility of undiscovered animals living in your environment.
Hmm.
How do you how do you account for that? How do you explain that, to other Americans um, that you interact with in your country, that there could be large bipedal primates wandering around in your country that for some
Yeah,
reason, science hasn't discovered?
we haven't
How do you
discovered them.
quantify that?
You know, I mean, that's the million-dollar question. It really is,
Yeah.
especially when people will say, some of these beings could be up to 7, 8, 9, 10 foot tall, some
Uh,
larger in some cases, weighing approximately 800, 1,000. It's like, how could something like this
mm,
exist? Well, we were just talking about Washington State,
yeah.
and they can't find planes. That would be, I would think, a little bit easier. But
Uh,
yet, how are they discovered, or how are they have been seen
yeah.
in all these other parts of the United States, and especially Wisconsin? You would think that something that big would you'd be out. There would be no way that they would go unnoticed.
Yeah.
And how stealthy and how quiet they are. Um, how I could actually say being out there, if you looked on, again, Google Maps, excuse me, and you look at this and you go, well, if you pan out, it doesn't seem that big. If you're looking at the Ozarks, or if you're looking, um, you know, definitely in Washington, you would say Wisconsin's really nothing. Yet when you're out there and you're just a little pin drop and you get off that beaten path, you get turned around, you can get lost. In fact, we have I listen to follow a Wisconsin scanner updates. It's like police calls type thing, but it's more
Oh yeah.
off Facebook
Yeah.
than just your regular scanner. And there are people that are uh, having to call somebody to come out there to find them. So
Wow.
it still is pretty vast because you do have the kettles, you have lakes, ponds, um, thick woods, that it definitely could. When I bring somebody out there and you're out there by yourself, just the two of you or however many you're looking at, you start to say, yeah, something that big could
Yeah.
definitely, definitely live out here. It's a perfect habitat for it. But again, how can something that big, that heavy, not be detected, not be seen in all these years? Well, people do have sightings around these parts here, and you know, with that being said, you can't really to take just one or two instances when there could be hundreds of encounters of
Hmm.
saying something could live there. Now, you know, when I first started doing this, I actually thought I was looking for a flesh and blood great ape. Just we haven't caught up with yet. There's a lot of people that are like that. I know the BFRO. Uh, they're
Uh-huh.
strictly they're strictly flesh and blood. But these the encounters that I've had and that I've seen, it doesn't seem like any natural way of an animal to move. I mean, even if you looked at the fastest jaguar, in slow motion and fast motion and how fast they are. I had a sighting to where this, what looked like an auburn shape with hair on it, just for a second, it moved like a fly. Did you ever take a fly swatter and you're about to
Mm.
smack that fly because he's buzzing you and you go as fast as you can, but he's gone? That's how fast it moved. And I'm like, what normal animal could move that way? And so that, I always try to keep that open mind of saying,
Hmm.
maybe it is flesh and blood, but you know, you're already crazy if you say you're looking for Bigfoot. But now if you say they
Yeah.
walk through, if they walk through dimensions, then you're really a crackpot. And if they come down through UFOs, you're gone. But you have to keep that open mind. I can't look at it just as a
No,
flesh
I
and
mean,
blood, yeah,
I totally
primate.
appreciate that. It's
Yeah.
and a lot of people come to that conclusion actually because it's the same with things like Loch Ness and other things. I think there's an innate human tendency um, to believe that something has some supernatural power if we can't solve it or if we can't find it,
Correct.
because
Right.
it's some sort of hidden ego that the human species has. Where we say, well, we can't really explain how that happened. Like the pyramids, for example. We
Hmm.
just can't figure out how those guys could have been that smart because we think that we started off dumb and got clever. So we
Hmm.
can't figure that out. Aliens must be aliens. Instead of thinking, well, then at that point we were really smart and then we got dumb again and then a bit smarter and dumb, and there were different
Right.
stages at which we knew more and then knew less. England is a great example of that. We were far dumber after the Romans left and the Saxons came for the next, 700 or 800 years than we'd been the previous 500. And some of the technology that the Romans gave us, the Saxons didn't have any conception of. All the roads fell into disrepair
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. And yet they came later. Um, Dark Ages, for example, things like that too, where we seem to lost knowledge that we had previously. It just seems to me sometimes, and it's not a be all, I don't know the answer, but I always ask myself that question: is it, Andy, because you can't find it? And now
Hmm.
you say, well, it's because portals, paranormal, supernatural. How, and I know you're a paranormal
Yeah.
investigator as well, which is very interesting. Looking for things like ghosts or poltergeist manifestations or whatever else that you might investigate out there. How how do we squeeze, or what would be the theory that squeezes something like Sasquatch into that genre as well?
Until the paranormal, I kind of, as I was investigating the ghost phenomenon, um, I wasn't on the fence of that they were just people that have passed on and their souls
Mm.
stuck around, like Patrick Swayze from Ghost or Casper,
Yeah,
and they just moved on. However, depending on how you are, what you believe in your religion,
mm,
I'm definitely a Christian. The Bible
yeah,
does speak about spirits,
uh,
but at the same time, because I think my God is all powerful, all knowing, almighty, and creates everything, all loving, that the things that we don't even think that are possible are beyond what we could even comprehend. And that would go with parallel universes, multi dimensions. That who's to say? This is kind of a long-winded answer, but I always say you've seen the movie Back to the Future where Doc Brown
yeah,
puts the timeline on the chalkboard, and but my string theory is that it literally there is no straight linear line, that it's more like a bow, a Christmas package, a gift like
uh,
a bow on a package that's going forward, backward, under, and around, that I do believe that it's very well possible, like let's in the ghost phenomenon, that the ghosts that we are seeing, let's say we're in this one area, let's say Waverly here in the States, it's an old asylum,
Hmm.
now you can go and investigate it, but at one point it was new and it was a hospital. So let's say, when it was brand new, back in 1910, John and Sally are walking down the hallway and they seem to be having what I always say, a super long day or a super fast day. We all have those.
Hmm.
But what if things are intermingling? They're having their long day. Next thing you know, they don't feel like they've left that hallway, but really they have, by the bow, the way that the time ebbs and flows, and actually comes to 2020 where we're investigating Waverly down that hallway, and we happen to see a shadow person, and we're going there expecting to see ghosts, and well, we saw a
Ah,
shadow person, and we see him for a second, and all of a
so you
sudden,
mean
John and
like it's
Shally,
sort of
yeah,
a
right.
time crossover? They
Well,
coincide, so it's
exactly,
almost
but
like
but
a
even
double
yeah,
negative.
yeah. Well, John and Sally are still in that same hallway, right?
Uh,
And they happen to see two shadow people for a second, and
hmm.
they document that as a ghost because that's what
Yeah.
they were taught. Then again, what we are reading in our history about ghosts. What if they were just reading about us?
Yeah.
Again, it's my kind of my string theory
That's
of
very
the.
interesting.
Well, thanks. It's not like it's anything. I don't want to say new. I haven't seen anything like that,
Hmm.
but I started thinking about that in 2010, uh, where I was in the office and there was a customer service person up front, and I heard the customer saying, "Oh man, this day is taking forever." I heard that being said. Then my salesperson came into the office while I was working, and this was totally unrelated to the same day, and she's like, "Oh, this is such a long day." I mean, I was already feeling that. Then when another customer came in, the same thing happened, and I'm thinking, you know, I guess sometimes I'll think of like birds. Like you put a bunch of birds together, and if you ever go to a pet store or just see them out in the wild, if there's a bunch of them,
Hmm.
if they're cleaning, the birds cleaning, they all seem to be cleaning. If they're sleeping, they
Hmm.
all seem to be sleeping. Uh, going with your flock of birds, flying with the flock.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was thinking, but how is that possible in this situation where they're all unrelated people having a long day? You know what I mean?
Uh,
It's
yes.
very
Yes.
different. So, that's where I started thinking that, maybe on these long days, something's happening. Don't know what,
Okay.
but I'm thinking that when I start thinking about my string theory of the bow, is that
Uh,
we're constantly everywhere. So, where does this all fit with Bigfoot or any cryptid
okay.
that seem to come in and out of our time, meaning that you're following. And I found these in 2014 in the snow, 12 set of huge footprints. I was trying to debunk them at the time.
Hmm.
They just ended in the middle of nowhere. A lot of time, today's favorable mainstream thing in the Bigfoot world is they went through a portal. But what's a portal? It's such an easy way out to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Do they exist? Well, I imagine I've never seen one. I can't say that, but just like ghosts, I mean, what are ghosts, and can they come in to our reality and actually knock a lamp over physically
Hmm.
and then be gone? But they're not passed on. Again, just
I
a thought.
understand what you're saying. I
Yeah,
do, and I think that I mean that's a very plausible theory. The convergence of the almost when when you've been animated in pre-computers and you put
right,
the trace, you put the
right.
trace over the picture and you add something else. Well, they're existing at the same time, but essentially it's one picture. You've added
Correct.
the detail. I can definitely
Yeah.
envisage that happening.
And
My
again,
theory
not
on
go ahead.
oh sorry, no, no, you go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, just again, my theory. I'm not a scientist. I didn't go to Harvard,
Uh,
Yale, Oxford. I didn't go
Well,
to any of these places. So, I'm just saying that
unfortunately, that doesn't prove intelligence these days anyway. Unfortunately, it
that's true.
doesn't seem to result in sensible theories. Um, Not that they aren't intelligent people; they come up with those insane ideas.
Right.
But it just shows that the one thing that's actually I've always found remarkable in life, similarly to yourself, I'm a Christian. I was nearly a pastor many years ago, but I decided not to do it. Did the study and everything. I think at the time later I kind of realized that I was a Christian who was more really interested in the background of his religion and what it meant, more than being a shepherd, as it were. Um, and that's always my place. Even I was always questioning everything about it and the history and what went into it and where the denominations and the theories or the cultures impacted that religion to create sort of a denominational slant, as it was in Protestantism or Catholicism, etc. How those things worked out and changed our world was always amazing to me. And I often apply that knowledge to cryptozoology because I realize um, how often faith or belief in Christianity can actually be very linked with tradition, things that aren't actually a part of Christianity at all, but have come in via culture and via time. So we had this, and Bigfoot has that same issue, that same problem. Theories that well-established people in our genre who are respected and have introduced as ideas have become facts over time, or something that we all believe to be a fact that um, it can't be questioned. So one example was in my old church, there was a huge church organ in the wall, and it'd been there for about 200 years, and it was coming apart. It was basically taking down the sidewall, and they had to get rid of it. And there was this big opposition in the church, as if it was a sacred object. You can't take down the church organ. It's holy, This is God's church. And the pastor gave a great sermon, and he said, he held the Bible up and said, I've been all the way through this book, several times, and I still can't find anything in here about a church organ. And
That's
what he was
crazy.
basically telling us is was when something stays within our faith or our philosophy for a long enough period of time, laboring the point I know, it becomes sacred, it becomes written, it becomes sacrosanct, and we can't get rid of it anymore, question it. And I wonder if we're coming to that place now in cryptozoology and the paranormal where the trailblazers that came before us and took those brave stands and came up with those series, we've just taken their precepts as word and we're building upon them instead of investigating the original foundations.
Yeah, yeah.
And which I know it's all very well for me to say, but I've got to investigate those foundations first.
But isn't that funny? Because it's like, well, I don't want to say funny. It's I guess it's the way we think, right? Like you said, it's
Yeah,
almost like this awakening to think this way. And I don't know if it's like you said, um, learning about the Bible, your pastor ways.
yeah,
That's what I do. I mean, I'm not learning to do that, but always strive to learn more about what the word and the truth is,
yeah,
um, which then actually helps me try to find the truth of what's really going on out here. And it's not
yeah.
being the first one to find it or whatnot. There's too many people doing that in the
Oh
world.
yeah,
Too much
yeah,
drama. I like my own little area. I like to research it, go with friends, be the journey, but constantly try to keep that open mind, like you were saying about the organ. What's going to end up showing up, out in the kettle, a house. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You just
yeah,
you never know, but you have to keep that open mind.
yeah. Yeah, well, let's hope it's not a house made of sweets, Jay. Out
Right.
there in the woods. Well, listen, yeah, I'm really fascinated. You've got the documentary Finding Jay, 5 years in the Kettle Moraine. You've had experiences out there. Have you had, just for people listening, have you had any graphic, very descriptive sightings? We've had the Auburn shape moving very fast. I'm assuming that's a bipedal shape. Have you ever had something you would call a bona fide, indisputable Bigfoot sighting?
Yes.
Okay, tell
Definitely,
us
I
about
can
that.
say, yeah, I'm going to say that I've had four different sightings out there, and one, I'll just really briefly recap, was I was out
Uh,
with my 4-year-old daughter. It's actually in the documentary, and she's 4 years old. But this is where people hike, bike, but this was in February, and the trails were kind of frozen, and she was really into ice skating. Father and daughter, little legs, little hike. Just let's get out there, and she's skating around my feet. We're about to leave, and out of the right side, and I always say like a T-Rex because,
uh,
like, well, we all saw Jurassic Park, right? So anything that
oh yeah.
moved, you'll look at. And something at about my 2 o'clock was moving, looked at it, and it was February, so everything was really brown, but this was definitely auburn, and it was huge. And from the 80 yards that I saw it, and it looked, just for that second, you got to remember, I looked, hair, auburn, boom, gone like a blur. Never
Uh,
seen it move that way. So I had to question what that was. Was I seeing things? Again, Jay, if you're going out looking for Bigfoot, you're going to find it. And I said,
yeah.
you're right. I always say, you're right. And if a turkey hunter goes out and looks for turkey to hunt, he's going to find them. If people go out and deer hunt, they're going to find them. If you're going to go shoot
God
wild
forbid you should
boar,
find the thing you went out looking for, right?
exactly. So, but at this point, this was kind of just a hike, and but that's where it gets terrifying because my kids are my
Mm,
world. I had my little
mm,
daughter here. If something moved that fast, I don't care what kind of gun you had, and which I don't carry firearms for certain
yeah.
reasons. But I do have backups and everything like that. Bear spray that shoots 33 feet, and long machete and all that. But you know what? It doesn't matter. If it moved that fast, it could have snatched my daughter without me knowing about it. And that kills me. I actually stopped
Yeah.
researching for a month after because I'm like, I don't know what we're dealing with. All right, people want to say this is a primate we haven't caught up with. No, I honestly don't think so. So again, you were saying, was it definitive? Auburn goes with it. Size goes with it.
Mm,
The movement, no, that does not go with it. I would say that would go to something paranormal or supernatural.
uh,
But that was it. And we actually, of course, made it back to our car. My daughter, oblivious to what happened. Um, but in that same area a year later, again, now this was at night and it was in January, but in the Kettle Moraine, if you have enough snow on the ground and the right lighting in the sky at night, and there was no moon, but even stars will give off a
mm,
good ambient light. You can see like an animal without flashlights out there.
mm,
You can make out every tree, every shrub, or what. We're actually sitting on top of a kettle looking down a 300-foot kettle. I was out with Mary Marshall, the paranormal MD. She was really interested in this, and we found this huge log. I want to say log, but it was like a big oak tree branch that fell. But you could fit, I don't know, like 6 or 7 people on this thing. And we found a spot to sit, not in the snow, and stake out. It was perfect. And she was sitting to my right, looking over my left shoulder. I was sitting on the left, looking over her right shoulder. And we're just hunkering down. It's cold and everything.
mm.
And all of a sudden, and I was saying I really can't tell distance, but um, the best I could say is 20 yards away, maybe the best from where we're at on the kettle of where I saw. I saw what looked like, I said, because I recorded the audio, I wasn't prepared for this. And that's why people don't get good pictures of anything, is because you're not prepared for it. You're going to sit down, you're going to wait for it to announce itself, so you can get your camera out and your HD and your thermal and
Mm.
get that perfect. I wasn't ready, but I was recording audio. And what I saw was it looked like, um, a, I say in the actual audio, it looked like a monkey, but the words we're trying to get out was it looked like the physique of a chimpanzee,
Uh,
gangly, and it was on all fours, but it wasn't like walking like a gorilla would walk on all fours, but it kind of had its butt down and its
uh,
his left or his rear the haunches a little bit, right behind his butt a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost looked like he was sitting, standing, but all on all fours. But here's what's weird. I'm looking at this, and it moves behind a tree. Now, you would say, okay, it moved behind a tree. What's so strange about that? It looked like it was a statue of a huge chimpanzee, like man size. It didn't look like it was a short, squatty
Mm-hmm.
chimpanzee like you'd see in Planet of the Apes movies or the new ones anyway. It looked long, gangly, and it was still in that position, and it moved behind the tree as if it was a statue on a cart with wheels and somebody was pulling it. It never moved. It never gave any movement.
Oh,
It just glided,
glided.
glided.
Aha.
And so right when I looked at that, of course, you don't have anything to record with. But not only that, but then you're really questioning your sanity, going, okay, well, I'm out here doing this, but did I really just see this?
And
And
what's
yeah,
sorry? Go
I was,
ahead.
I was gonna say, and I always say until this day, I can't unsee it. And that's when we got home later that night, I sketched out like Richard Dreyfuss and Close
Mm-hmm.
Encounters of the Third Kind with Devil Mountain. This is
Ah,
something, and I drew it out. But
not a
I'll go ahead.
mashed potato.
And no mashed potatoes, but I did draw it out because it was stuck in my head.
Well, good. I mean, I'd really love to see that. Um, I've heard a lot of stories like this actually, and what I always wonder is how do you feel in that moment then? Because there you are, as you said, you talked about the fear when you were with your child and you saw
Mhm.
you, as a father, you assessed the tactical situation when you saw the power of the creature and the speed that it moved. So already you know, I'm outgunned here, and I've got my daughter with me. What am I going to do, right? Or outmatched. And then you're there with your researcher friend, and you see what's essentially a very creepy sighting, this creature on all fours, like a chimpanzee, but very, very long and big. Now, I get lots of descriptions like this about them going down onto all fours, especially at nighttime. And I think this is like a defensive thing. Could it be a bear? It's a mimicry of some kind, to sort of not stand out. Because when you're standing, you stand out when you're a Bigfoot,
Mhm.
right? But you see this thing, and it's nighttime, it goes behind a tree, and you know it's still there. You're there in the dark. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about your safety, about the situation? What happens after you see that?
And that's the other part because again, in my movie or in the documentary that I put out, all you got to do is start reading all the reviews on it because there are some really nasty ones that they
That
don't
was
care. They
offensive.
don't care
Yeah.
about my family. The 1 star, I give this 0 stars. Or
Yeah.
the best is you bring your kids out. What kind of father are you? The two, oh, you didn't have your camera. What a bunch of horse beep. But it's basically this. You don't know. If you've ever deer hunted, which I
Yeah.
used I used to be a deer hunter, and I used to go in the stand at 5 in the morning
Yeah.
before the sun, and you get all set. You want to be as quiet as you can and wait for the light to come, the sunrise to come up, and then
Hmm.
you're as soon as it comes up, you're expecting to see all these deer that you can shoot at, but that's not the case.
Mm.
You sit and you wait and you wait and you wait. Next thing you know, it's getting time to get down. You just spent what seems like a year in your tree stand. All right, you're finally, it's nothing's going to happen. You're going to start
Mm.
putting your stuff away. All of a sudden, here comes a deer, just like that. And all of a sudden, you weren't prepared. Maybe I wasn't the best deer hunter that just never moved, but
Yeah.
you have to, or you'd fall asleep. But it's the same thing with being out there. Is you're gonna get in position. You think this is good. That you're doing all. Boom, there it is. Okay, what do you do with that
It's
now?
so hard.
Yeah.
Who's running their camera all night as well? You don't have
Well,
that kind of battery. You're not
but how
running your
about
camera for 8 hours.
yeah? I was gonna say, but how about this even? And this would go with ghost hunting, or paranormal investigating. Is if you're out with somebody and they say, "Oh, did you hear that?" Well,
Mm.
I didn't, so I can't tell you if I did. Okay. The person's like, I just heard a sound. Whoops. I just heard a sound way over there. And you're like, well, maybe you did. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't hear it. Well, think about this. Mary didn't see it. So here I'm telling her that I just saw a huge monkey, a chimpanzee. And her reaction is she didn't see it. So she's not going to get too excited about it. And and people are like, well, why didn't you walk down to that area and try to find tracks? It's so easy
Yeah.
to think of these things afterwards, but the one thing that happens right after we see that huge branch that we're on begins to vibrate.
Uh,
Now, I thought it was Mary shivering, causing it to, until she said, "Are you doing that?" And I said, "Doing what?" And she goes, "Shaking the tree." And I'm
hmm
like, "No, it's like vibrating, but our feet, which were on the ground, were not vibrating." So curious. This was, a good 20, 25-foot branch that we were on that I was thinking maybe I was meant to look that way, but, it's the old bait and switch, the flanking. What was
Yeah.
behind us?
Yes.
And all this detoured us from investigating that spot.
Uh-huh.
I can come up with a million excuses of why I didn't, and maybe I should go back to school to become a better investigator. But
Everything is clear in hindsight.
right,
Everything is
exactly.
clear in hindsight. There's a story. There's a British researcher here. He won't mind me mentioning it, Neil Young.
Yeah.
And on my channel, there's a recording of what he believes is infrasound. So he and a friend of his, they had some sightings in a forest in Northumberland, Harwood Forest. Anyway, they were staking out this forest every weekend. They were always there, these guys, for years and years before there was ever any British Bigfoot phenomenon being reported, or there were active researchers. Those guys were there. And one night they're there, and they've got their recorder, the sound recorder. So they've got their cameras. They're going to stay in the forest where they've had activity. And as time gets on, they both start feeling really, really uncomfortable. They decide to go back and sleep in the car. They're really uncomfortable. These guys aren't the kind of guys that get uncomfortable and go back to the car. They're just not those kind of guys. And they do. The next day they come back, they get the recorder home. Later when they check it, there's the sound below 20 HC, like a growl of some kind, I guess. I thought it was very interesting. Were they getting, I hate that word zapped, but were they
Well,
being hit with a bit of infrasound beforehand and made them feel like, oh, I don't want to be here. I want to get out. And sure enough, there was the proof. Oh, well,
I've had that in different encounters about the zapped, I believe. But as far as the log or the branch, I'm thinking, how did it just get the branch and not us?
yeah,
You know what I mean? Why are
yeah,
we feeling the physical vibration of this huge branch,
yeah.
but you didn't feel it in your body? You didn't feel it on the ground. It was like singling just that branch. So
Can it be
that's where
directional? You think
uh,
infrasound?
mi-
Can we do that ourselves technologically?
I don't know. You know, but at this point, I was thinking that afterwards, again,
Yeah.
never there. So, you could leave your bad reviews on me on that. But, I'm thinking, wait a minute, what if something was actually holding that branch and it wasn't infrasound and it was something physical, just shaking the tree that we were, or the branch we were on?
Oh,
That's what we were feeling, but what was behind us. Um,
that's
what
powerful.
that's what I'm saying is, I mean, who knows? And again, I don't know. And I didn't actually look for prints right there because we didn't hear anything because, you know, apparently they're so stealthy that you can't hear them come or go. Yet they're almost 1,000 pounds and you should be able to
Yeah.
hear anything walk through there. So why? I don't know. Because I've also heard like um, total silence out there, not that same night, but in different cases to where
Yeah.
no animals, but it almost sounded like I don't know if you ever remember those old movies, the Naked Gun or Get Smart, with the cone of silence where they'd sit
Yeah.
at the table and the cone would come down. It almost gave that type of effect as if
Yeah.
you were out in the kettle and a big bubble came over you and you
That
heard
is right.
nothing.
That
Right.
is
So
right.
I don't know if that has anything
Now,
to do with
what
infrasound as
sounds would
well.
you normally what sounds would you normally hear there in the forest at night?
Uh,
Crickets? Things like
Yeah,
that?
if you were going to go out on a spring, summer,
Yeah.
fallish, you'd definitely hear some frogs in a pond.
Uh-huh.
You'd hear the occasional the whippoorwill. It's like
Oh, it's a bird, right? Yeah. Yeah.
they're kind of a dusk night, and you'll hear some owls every once in a while. You'll hear some crows, coyote,
Uh-huh.
not all at once. It's not like a zoo,
Yeah. Yeah.
but going out there, you think you would hear more. And that's the other thing is I try to get out there as much as I can, but I'm not out there 24/7. I'm not a mountain man who lives out there that can tell you this is normal, because I'm thinking there's really like no animals around here. This is weird, which
Yeah.
is the other case of apex predator or something out there. I don't know, but
I
it's
believe,
general. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
that
generally pretty quiet.
animals are smart. That's my view. They're smart within their world. They have the skills to survive in the world in which they live, and even frogs, crickets, and all types of animals with tiny brains know when there's a predator around, and they shut up.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, they just
Yeah,
shut up.
I
Yeah,
believe I believe that they the woods is their world, so
yeah,
they definitely know what's coming around the bend and what's not right,
yeah.
and like you said, when to be quiet. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I've seen it. I've absolutely seen it so many times. I think we don't give animals, as humans, we don't give animals enough credit because they're not smart in the way that we're smart. We don't believe they're smart at all. And they really are.
Right.
They really, really are. Do you have black bear there in
They're more north, more northern Wisconsin, and
uh,
right next to us, Minnesota. However, there has been a black bear that has come down through here through the state line that went into Illinois, and believe it or not, they just kind of tracked it, going
okay,
all the way to southern Illinois. So there are black bear, but the black bear are small.
okay.
Um, one of these instances for my film is it was December of 2017. Really no snow, but it was kind of cold out, and I took both kids for just an afternoon hike. Again, it was
Mm,
going to be a quick 1 hour hike in a circle back, and it was right before Christmas. And that whole time I felt watched. I could be out there,
mm,
100 times and never feel watched, and I felt watched, and I felt like my alert was up, but I didn't really want to, give all that away to the kids. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
they know what I'm looking for. They're also out there looking for that too. They're, oh, look, an X, in the trees,
yeah,
and we stick on the path. I'm always about safety. I always keep them ahead of me.
yeah.
But there's one point where we went around this one bend, and my son said he just saw something move. It was, I mean, he was using an 8 to 9 foot. He couldn't really tell. It was 2 years ago. He was 9, I guess. He kind of could have, but I'm always like, hey, you know what? Kids are going to look for attention from their dad. That's what he's doing. And so I thought I'd humor him as well. And I record everything, every instance
Yeah.
and every reaction, and pull out the iPhone and I'm recording them. And but but I know my son, and he genuinely looked kind of freaked prior to me filming. I was trying to get out fast enough because I wanted to get that reaction, because that's truth to me, because I know my
Yeah.
son. And as I'm recording, I come across this huge dark shape in the woods, and it's weird because I am recording it and kind of looking with my eyes, and it's weird, and I really don't give enough due in my film of explaining why I didn't keep it on there. I think in the film I said I just felt like I was doing something wrong. It's hard to
Yeah.
explain. I didn't really want to get into all that. It's almost like if you are in the wrong part of town, you are by yourself, you're going to
That's
get in your
exactly
car.
what I was thinking.
Yeah, if you were
Exactly what I
like
was,
in
yeah.
your car, and all of a sudden across the street you see two men trying to break into a car, and you put your phone up to record them,
Yeah.
that's the sense that I got doing it.
Yeah.
And and I got this, really, we got to get the heck out of here.
Yeah. You're
And
not
we
an
did.
observer
Yeah.
in a vacuum. You're in the situation.
Oh yeah,
You
and again,
exist
like
in
you
that
like
situation, and
yeah,
people don't appreciate that whatever you're recording has the capacity to react to you.
right.
Recording, even pointing something at it,
You
many
don't know.
animals they would take umbrage to that. They would
Well,
take a exception to that
exactly,
situation.
but it's
Yeah.
weird because I wasn't even thinking of that per se, I guess. I think it was more like, hey, dude, I'm taking a shower here. Can you get that
Yeah.
camera off me, or
Yeah.
something? I
Yeah.
mean, it really was weird. And of course, my dad mode was always in, but now it went red flag.
Yeah.
Let's just get this camera off. We're gonna pretend like we didn't see it. That's the other thing. You hear me talking to my kids after,
Mm.
and not bringing attention to it or anything, and pretending like it didn't happen. Maybe whatever it was would not come and get me and my kids. That's
Yeah.
kind of what I felt a little bit until we left, and then I felt okay. And then, going back and taking a screenshot of the video of said shadow, again, you know, well, I've gotten ripped on that. Like, as soon as you took that camera, on the reviews in Amazon, as soon as you pulled that camera away, I'm like, this guy is false. He's a fraud. He doesn't know how to investigate. This guy's a piece
These
of crap.
people, though.
Yeah, you're
Okay,
not
let's talk
there.
about this actually because
Yeah, yeah.
you're out there and okay, getting trolled is part of it. I get it. I get it. Um, I give a little, if it's polite and everything on my page, for example, I give a little sort of space for it. If it's, and I'll chat back and talk. But I always explain, to people, not happy on the page, it's a dictatorship and not a democracy. It's a page, not a group. So if I really don't like you, I'm just gonna ban you. But
Right. Yeah,
if you're not
right.
polite, if you're not nice. But generally speaking, we're used to this kind of trolling here. But people have this really weird concept. You have something on there. Your documentaries on Amazon. People can watch it. Great documentary. They have this concept that you owe them some level of service and some I don't know um, fixed reactive protocol that you're supposed to adhere to every single time something happens. Like you're
Right.
explaining with the kids, you've seen something there, you immediately, your heckles are up, you've got the impression that you're intruding and you should pretend like nothing's going on. And as you can do with a wild animal, pretend like you haven't seen it and it sort of almost lowers its alarm
Right.
level and on you go because it thinks they haven't seen me. That's cool. I'll just stay
Right.
here.
Yeah.
And off you go. People don't get that. And they troll you. Anybody, I always think, anybody who gives 1 star for anything is not being honest because nothing's a 1 star. Um, a 1 star with a page paragraph is no, 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 no. When I look at your documentary, there's tons of 5 stars, and a couple of fours and threes, and there's a couple of ones. And I think, well, this is just mean spiritedness. And why do we live in this environment now where people are so eager to really stick the boot in, to
I
really
don't
hurt
know.
you?
And
What
that's
is it?
one. I don't know because a lot of people get a hold of me on Facebook Messenger or my other pages associated with my
Yeah,
main page, and they're coming to me saying how much they enjoyed it. I just want to let you know, which is great. You know what that again, it doesn't go into the ratings of
yeah,
where it's at, but every single one of those, I'll reply to because that is one special
yeah,
person that
yeah.
I created and touched their lives somehow. Did I expect this to be Avengers Endgame type movie? No, or Titanic, whatever the flavor is.
Yeah.
It 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 was a movie. It was a documentary of a story that started in 2013 up to 2000 mid 2018 is where it kind of
Uh,
ended. I'm still researching, but I had to put that part out because it's just too weird. And the best part of that, so out of all the trolls,
uh,
I have found people that have gotten a hold of me. They have no idea where I did this, right? In the whole
yeah.
documentary, I never said where I research. Would you believe they've had an encounter a year ago?
Mm,
And do you know where it was? Smack dab in the middle of my research area.
that's great.
And this is validation not only for me and that I can come home and tell my wife your husband's not crazy, but is also to help. It's
But she
also to
doesn't
help.
believe you.
I know. Well, yeah, she supports me and she believes just like me, that God could create something like this, but maybe
Of
it'd be
course.
more
Absolutely.
on the Pacific
Yeah.
Northwest. Um, but it helps validate the other people as well, and we can almost sit there and instantly we have this bond instantly
Yeah. It
because
definitely
you're
helps.
talking about
Yeah.
this. So when people ask me, and I listen to the Cliff Brackmans and Bobos
Mm,
and Wes and everybody out there, because I like to tune in. I'm an old dog. I'll be 53, and I feel like I could still learn, and I always want to learn. So that therefore, I don't look at the people that might have a higher,
mm,
I don't want to call them elites, but the TV personalities,
yeah.
or they're just well known that way. They still have a lot. to offer with what they're doing. Nobody really knows, right? So
And
when
they'll
people
say that
start,
to you. Yeah,
yeah,
they'll say
yeah,
exactly that. Yeah.
and the thing is I tell people that, they say, well, do you go bigfooting? I don't call it bigfooting, I call it hiking, but people call it bigfooting. Do you go bigfooting or squatching all over? And I'm like, no, I have one area, and this is where I am researching. And this is where I'm going to continue to research. So I can't tell you about California, Washington, all these other different states around me. I can tell you about what's here because I'm here. And that's what I'm going to continue to do.
And would you
I keep
say
my
that
so
that's actually, a lot of people say that's a good research method because you know the area, you know when something is different, you understand
right,
what's in it, and when something that isn't usually there turns up, you get it.
exactly.
I always think
It
for that.
uh,
Uh,
oh, go
sorry, I
ahead.
was going to say just with Bigfoot with its own backyard, it's like your own backyard. The forest is its backyard. If a tree is out of place, if it's a game cam on the side there that's camouflaged, that's not hidden. He sees it. He knows. It's like if you come into my house and you take a book out and put it somewhere else, I'll come into the house and I'll be like, "Hey, something's weird here.
Right.
Something's
Well,
off."
but that's what's even weird is because, I've been out there now for over 7 years. Now, I'm not out there every day. I try to get out there weekly. And there is just something I heard that I found out it was a different type of bird that I've never heard in 7 years out there, but it sounded very peculiar.
Mm.
A lot of people are like, well, it's probably a bird. It could have been a mimic of a Bigfoot. And I'm like, well, I guess we'd have to actually find said Bigfoot, watch him do said mimic to actually say that. So it's really hard for me to
Yeah,
do that unless it was literally like a hoo hoo, something like that. Then I would say, okay, well, it sounded like an owl, but then it turned into
yeah.
a gorilla.
I'm more
Um,
than prepared to
yeah.
believe that they mimic animals, but I mean, it's kind of jumping the gun. We got to find out if they're there in the first place before we get onto the point
Well,
of whether they
it,
mimic creatures.
and
Because
that's exactly it.
yeah,
To me, it's like I know they're there,
yeah,
but I can't tell you what they are. That's what I can
uh,
say. There is something there, but I don't know what they are. And if they do live in this habitat, whether it's in Wisconsin, California, the UK, Australia, it doesn't matter. They're using their surroundings like we use our cell phones or our
yeah.
computers. That's how they're using everything out there. So why couldn't they easily mimic? I guess if we were living out there all the time and I wanted to call you Andy, I'd be like, hoo, 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 or whatever. I don't want to
Oh,
embarrass myself.
definitely. I mean, I believe it's completely and utterly possible. I'm more referencing. I had some uh, researchers sending me some things at some point in forests in the UK, and then yeah, they're in the forest. It's nighttime. Hoo hoo! And the researcher says that was a Bigfoot pretending to be an owl. Well, there's owls in that forest, so we can't exclude that to begin with. I mean,
Right, right.
and he was actually there with his son, um, who was I don't know how old he was, but a young boy. And in the video, he says, "I heard a noise there." And he says to his son, He said it sounded like a young boy. Was that you? And his son says, "No, it wasn't me." I said that was a Bigfoot. Well, I'm thinking, okay, it could have been the owl, could have been a Bigfoot noise. The mimicry of the sun could have been a Bigfoot. But since you have an owl in the forest and the sun next to you, we can't validate that as evidence of one. And to me, it's the lived experience I know is always completely different to the perceived one. You've experienced that with the hecklers and the trolls looking at the video and trying to pick little bits out to say, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Because the lived experience is different. But how do we resolve? I mean, are we looking for evidence? I'm wondering. How do we resolve the evidence side of things? Um, how do we resolve it? How do we match that up with our lived experience to show it to people? Do you have ideas about that? I mean, we can show them footprints, perhaps, but
No, no. And this is what I tell people, and this is me. I'm like, they either are gonna believe, not believe, or be in the
yeah,
middle of expanding. The ones that really don't, I'm not gonna waste my time.
mm,
The ones that do, I could maybe help validate some of my experiences. But here's what I tell everybody is I say, as much as you're listening to my voice, as much as you are listening to what I'm saying tonight, or the film that you watched that I did for 5 years, don't take my word or that video's word on it.
Yeah.
Go out and discover it for yourself. It's like we were saying before. If you're gonna go look for a turkey, you'll find a
Mm,
turkey. If you're gonna look for the deer, whatever you're gonna look for, and I really do believe that if your heart is into it, that's the
mm,
other thing is it's not so much that I'm gonna go out and take one of these Bigfoot out and I'm gonna shoot it. Um, I, it's basically go out there, enjoy nature for number one.
mm,
Put away the phone, the electronics. Go out with a loved one. Go out with family. If you're going to go out at night, be safe. Go with a couple friends. Make sure it's in safety in numbers. But I guarantee this is what I'm almost going to say. I almost guarantee that you will have an experience or something unique will happen that you can identify with. And that's going to be your own personal truth.
mm.
Therefore, I could show you if I had a cast or a strand of hair or a recording that I had. You weren't there. Now, if you really believe in this, you would say, wow, he's got something. But the skeptics that don't want to believe, they may never see. They'll just go out and hike. And if they hear something, they'll just count that off as a bird or, something else out there.
It's
But I really do
normal
think,
human
yeah,
reaction.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's actually my next move is in the research, and I know that's crazy because people say it's a dangerous animal, and some people say oh, it's supernatural. And me, you know what I do? I pray. I take the power of God, and I just say, for protection. But I go out and I want to make contact with one of these, and I don't. It sounds weird because if you're in the ghost world, you want to make contact. That's
Mm,
almost demonic or satanic.
mm.
With these, we don't know what they are, but I have fallen down this rabbit hole where I'm still falling, and it's like I know they're there, and I want to tell everybody, and put up a flag. Bigfoot is real, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what a Bigfoot is. It
Oh.
could be anything, but I want to know what they are. I want to know,
Well,
their
I think
origin, their purpose.
that's the spirit of exploration and discovery, isn't it?
Yeah,
And that's what we're all addicted to in this genre. Regardless of what we're looking for, I think it's that age of discovery and exploration, which we've been told is past now, but it's not past because even with regular animals, species of known types of animals, we're still discovering new ones all the time. Sometimes some very big ones. The billy ape was always very surprising to me. There's this ape nicknamed lion killers by the locals in the Congo. They said 6 feet, 6 feet when standing.
yeah,
That's huge, and still we know next to nothing about them
right.
because their location. That's an amazing thing, and it's not very old, that discovery. Really not very old at all. And who would have believed that if the stories were coming out with there's some 6 foot tall apes that kill lions living in the Congo? Sure, there are.
Right.
Okay, well, then there's this creature. It's kind of like a donkey with the legs of a zebra and the head of a giraffe, but it's got a really short neck. Yeah, sure, that sounds like a crazy creature. The okapi, right? I mean,
Right, right.
there you go. I think the natural world is so amazing, and the natural abilities of natural creatures are so amazing. We just don't value them once we know how they work. We don't look at a chameleon and say, "What the hell?" or an
Right.
octopus, camouflaging itself uh, onto a rock, or becoming the same shape as a piece of seaweed and floating away in the same manner.
But
We
how, how
don't.
about how about how about that for the forever jellyfish, the
Oh
one
wow,
that
yeah,
doesn't even reproduce
shocking.
itself. It
Yeah,
just kind of could live forever.
yeah.
Or better yet, people keep saying because they're matching up again, going back to Sasquatch, they're matching up to primates, to monkeys,
Mm,
to us. So if they see a gray one, that one has to be 90 years old. And I'm like,
yeah.
how do you know? When was this? 4 years ago, they actually were crabbing, in the ocean,
Mm,
and they actually pulled up a lobster they crushed, and they thought it looked very unique. This is really an incredible story. It was a dead lobster now, but they crushed it, and they found out by doing the autopsy and whatever they were going to do to
Uh-huh.
it, the specimen, that this lobster was 400 years old. Okay, so again, what would have happened if they didn't crush it? Then okay, those are marine, but then I'm like, what about the macaw, the birds that can
Yeah.
live up to, or tortoise that can live
Oh, there was
that long?
the very famous Galapagos giant tortoise, which uh, belonged to one of the. It was one of the Raj. It was during the Raj. It was one of the Indian princes. I can't remember which one.
Yeah,
Anyway, he
no.
was relocated
Y-
afterwards and died recently, 256 years old.
So again,
Something like that.
not
Yeah.
going into Star Wars and Yoda and all that because
Yeah.
Yoda was 900 years old. But what if these what if the I don't even want to call them creatures, and I'm going to go on a limb. I call them people because if I'm going to go out in the woods and I want an animal, I'm going to bang on a tree and howl, and I'll get a monkey, I'll get something angry. If I go out there with some respect,
Mm.
I feel like I'm going to get that back. Therefore, there's that bond, and I think that if if they do and they're that evasive here or
Mm.
elusive, then what if that's how they keep their numbers down because of their longer longevity of
Longevity.
life?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So therefore, again, these are the theories, but I'm
Well,
like,
we don't know. Yeah. I
right,
mean, that's a
the
reasonable.
Native Americans that were here a couple hundred years ago that saw them and they thought they were spirit gods of the forest. What if it's the same one that I saw,
Mm.
a couple of years ago in the kettle that looked like, a long stringy, or a long
Mm.
gangly chimpanzee named Daryl or Hank or whatever, and he was from, whatever, a couple hundred years ago, and that's how they keep the population down, their population control by,
Uh-huh.
maybe reproducing every 100 or 200 years to keep it
Sure.
down.
Sure.
Who knows?
It's all up
But
for grabs, I think is
yeah,
what you're saying.
it's
It's
all
all
up
up
for
for grabs.
grabs, and
But
that but
what you're
that's
also
what I
saying
want
is
to
there
go
are other
down.
creatures in nature
In
that we
nature,
wouldn't expect to be able to do that. They do, so why not this animal? And I completely agree with that.
yeah,
But one of the exciting things about cryptozoology is essentially it is all up for grabs. So it gives a lot of freedom to theory, and to come up with your own theories. I like that about it. Not to say that we should just throw anything out there, but generally
exactly.
speaking, it's welcoming, it's open to different points of view. Now, straying away from the Sasquatch side of things, right in your bio that you had a UFO sighting when you were a child,
Hmm.
and that's something you've done quite a lot of exploration into as well. So just tell us about your UFO sighting. I mean, it's fascinating to me, really. Somebody who's not terribly interested in that genre, but grew up in a nation where there was a big rash of UFO sightings
Right.
when I was a child.
Yeah,
It's amazing to me to wonder what they could be. Or what's your experience and what's your take on it?
before getting into that, it was about a year prior that I was actually at my next door neighbor's house. I had to have been 77, so I'm about 10 years old, and he was 8, and we were playing Star Wars figures. I remember this like it was yesterday. And I was over at his house, up in his bedroom. He had the Millennium Falcon. It was the coolest thing, man. He had all the toys. And we were sitting on his windowsill, and I remember it was a beautiful sunny day with clouds, kind of Ferris Bueller type look. And we were sitting on his windowsill because it was almost like a makeshift toy box too. So you could actually sit up there. And all of a sudden, everything went black for what seemed like 5 seconds. Now, when I mean black, I mean just close your eyes and hold them
Oh,
closed for 5 seconds. It was weird, because I didn't know what just happened. But here's the really weird thing: is my friend Dave. He looked at me and he goes, "Did the lights just go out?" So this is in the middle of the afternoon on a summer day.
mm,
There's no way that we could have both shared a blackout for that short a time. And again, back then I wasn't really into it. It was just kind of a, huh, okay, that was weird, but I still remember it. almost what 40 years ago, or somewhere around there, 37 years ago. Um, but a year later is okay. Now I'm at my house. It was a Friday night, and my sister was coming home from a school event, and I remember her coming in. It was around 10 o'clock at night, and she's crying. She's hysterical. She's saying, "We're being invaded. We're being invaded." And I'm like, "What?" And so my mom comes out and she goes, "You got to check this out. We've been following it all the way home from the school, all the way to home." So it was my older brother, my younger brother, me, and my sister. We all went out. We all looked in the night sky, and you can see this thing um, where it looked like there was lights going around it, kind of
Mm.
spinning around like this, but nothing on top or bottom. So it was just the lights, and it was just going like this, and then it was hovering, and then it would go out, and it would be across the lake. That we were in front of a lake, all the way across the lake, doing the same thing, spinning and sitting there for a little bit, and then it looked like it was hovering a little bit. Boom, it would go out, and then it was almost making a triangle move to come back to
Mm.
where my next door neighbor's house was, which is really odd. Actually, I didn't even put those two together. I tell the blackout story and I tell the UFO story all the time.
Oh,
Well,
that's the same neighbor.
the same neighbor,
Oh.
he wasn't out with us at the time. It was late, and he was a kid, so I'm sure he was sleeping. Um, and I remember then it was right above us over the neighbor's house. And I'm not the best with 100% guesstimating with distance
Mm.
and stuff like that, but I'm going to say my best guess, maybe a football field, maybe two football fields above our house. You couldn't hear nothing. You couldn't see through the spinning lights. And then it just hovered and just kept going, blink out, gone. So that was like a really long mass sighting.
Mm.
It was really cool. And at that time, I always say this is that my grandpa K, my mom's dad, was in the early chapters of MUFON in Chicago.
Oh,
And
okay.
boy, oh boy, when we told him this sighting, a 10-year-old and his grandpa, lifelong bond. He was he was probably like the original Fox Mulder, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's old now and everything, but we would just talk. He'd tell me about his stories of what he has seen, what he's learned, and that was kind of my life before ghosts, before Bigfoot, before cryptids was pretty much all strictly UFOs, aliens, and all that.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, I think that it's a fascinating world actually, and again, although it's something I never paid particular mind to, there was something called the Welsh Triangle. I think back in the 70s and 80s in the area of Pembrokeshire, also Monmouth in Wales, and we knew people who'd seen things. Um, my family they ran a martial arts federation when we were growing up, and the original sensei, who wasn't part of our family, a guy called Colin Pike, he'd had I suppose, a very close visitation with a triangular-shaped UFO in some country lane, walking home from a pub late at night in Pembrokeshire, and he said this thing literally just stopped like 200 feet above his head, and it was right over him for a minute or something like that. I can't remember how to describe the lights on it, but it was essentially, a triangular shaped, um, unidentified flying object. But I always thought, well, okay, that's kind of, he was a very straight up guy,
Hmm.
honesty and truthfulness was a big part of that martial art that they were teaching us. So he probably wouldn't have lied. And many other people had these things, but, besides, there was just so many of them. Years later now, looking at drone technology and some of the spy vehicles that we've come up with, I often wonder if a lot of those things back then were the prototypes, the types of things we're seeing on the common market now, or
Right.
the military using. There's so many similarities. Now, of course, one can argue that one preceded the other and it could be based upon the things that we saw or captured. And
Oh, I agree. I
yeah, and
agree.
yeah. So who knows? I mean, who knows? Of course, there are alien sightings too. So it's hard to just say they're just vehicles. Now, that's something I want to ask you about actually before we finish it, and it's this. I often encounter in this genre, I encountered this issue where we might feel it's plausible to be into Sasquatch, but think that Dogman is ridiculous, for example. Or we might think that, yeah, sure, I believe in Nessie, but mermaids, that's fantastical. And
Hmm.
there's an element of, one man's meat is another man's poison to it.
Yeah.
Now, I realize that somebody who doesn't believe in any of these things, you say Sasquatch, Nessie, UFOs, mermaids, it's like saying the same thing
Hmm.
all the way across.
Right.
How, where does your faith, as it were, the limit of your belief end with these fantastical and unknown beings and creatures? Would you say yes to mermaids? Mermaids could be a thing, or
Well,
would you think that's perhaps too much of the folkloric and physiologically impossible?
and this is what I tell my wife. And she would tell you that right here, but she won't come on and say it.
Oh, she should say
And
hi.
no, and she always says, but I say, as soon as I'm done with Bigfoot, I'm going unicorns.
Ah,
And she's like, oh, no, you're not. And, of course, I'm joking about that, but no, how about the balls of light that are in the woods? I
yeah,
mean, are they related to Bigfoot, Dogman, cryptids,
they're often reported in
whatever?
conjunction. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so there's so much, but I don't know. I guess whatever is accessible to me, because unfortunately, I'm not a millionaire and I can't travel the world and
sure.
and, and look at all these other different. If I did, I would stop by to see you, Andy, because
Oh, I
I'd love
love that.
I'd
Yeah,
love to visit out there. But what's feasible is right here in my neck of my woods. I've got the Beast of Bray Road
yeah.
right up here. And that's just not the road, but it's the surrounding area. And it's all right before the kettle. Yet I'm finding more signs of behavior of Bigfoot. So, I'm good friends with Linda Godfrey. Her grandson's
Yes.
best friends with my son. And we have totally, gone on investigations down these areas, but not just Bray Road, but it's all of Elkhorn. What are these? I don't know. I mean, I don't even know where I would stop, because like you were saying about mermaids, as soon as you say you believe in mermaids, well, makes sense
Oh,
you believe in Bigfoot, right?
exactly. It's
Yeah.
almost like it's kind of like stepping over a line that you can't return from. Whereas if I were to investigate mermaids, like people used to, in fact, my first point would be, what physiological creature are people mistaking for some semi-human being? Is there just a sea creature that, in the right circumstances and
Right.
the state of
Right.
shock, resembles that? Like the old, obviously old adage used to be that sailors, too many months at sea, saw sea cows and went,
Right.
"Ooh, a beautiful mermaid." And of course, standards were a lot lower back in those days. So
Right. Exactly. They didn't. They
perhaps
didn't have to look like Ariel, the Little Mermaid.
no. I mean,
No.
just a nice tubby sea cow, and that was good for all of those guys. But yeah, it's always interested me. I yeah, I love watching your stuff. I love just keeping abreast of what's going on with you. There's two reasons for it. One, there's that it's interesting and it's in the subject that I really love. But the second one is that you're positive. The interactions I see you have with people are positive interactions. And this genre, unfortunately, has a lot of negativity to it.
Hmm.
And I've theorized for a long time that perhaps it's a small pond with lots of big fish, not much to eat, so they devour each other. Or is it just the normal competition that comes along with life? I don't know what it is, but there's something going on. Just to finish off, how do you keep so positive, and how do you keep these good relationships with everybody?
Well, number one, thank you very much, brother. I appreciate
Yeah,
that. I like to say, I joke with people and just say I'm half human, half alien hybrid, which always gets the laugh. But realistically, I am human. I do have my faults. I do get upset. Maybe you don't see this on social media or in my documentary or here. I am human. But at the same time, I try to keep that positive outlook. Just, I could actually contribute everything to God, to Jesus who died for me, knowing that I have a place that I'm going to go to is a great thing. So all this white noise around me is not the end of all ends.
Uh-huh.
And I do look at that because I know there are a lot of people that that talk, really talk the talk. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They love to hear themselves. We all do. We're human. I understand that.
Yeah.
But but what I mean is that they know everything. And
Yeah.
honestly, I let people talk. And that's okay because if you think about this, everybody who's doing this is researching is in the kind of in the same boat. We're all heading to the same truth. Whether the goal is to get up there as fast as you can to claim that discovery, to get that
Yeah.
$1 million or that Nobel Prize or whatever you're trying to go for, that's the whole different part of it. But we're all doing the same thing. So I guess I just kind of look at people and let them be who they want to be. And
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's the exact answer of just staying positive,
No.
but
I
I
I
say that
think
I
that's
say this
awesome.
when I pray with my kids at night is I always pray for the provisions. I always say we have a roof over our house, a bed to sleep in, clothes, food. That's what God is providing, and that's all we need. We don't need the materialistic things. We don't need
Mhm.
this or that's how come I said when I put out my documentary, I yeah, I almost kind of didn't want to because I liked being below the radar.
Mhm.
I liked being that way. I liked being able to investigate, doing what I want to do, and nobody nitpicking or leaving
There's
bad reviews
freedom.
or telling
There's
you this.
yeah.
Yeah, but you do put yourself out there, and so it's that way. But to stay positive, I I guess I just always say that, I believe in Jesus who died for me and he's in my heart and his spirit's in my heart. And I just hopefully can be more like him and that when people see that through me, that I'm trying to be more like him. I guess that's the
I
best way
think
I can
that's good
explain
answer.
it.
I think that's possibly, from my point of view anyway, the best answer you could have given. Um, Now, just before we go, tell people where they can find you, how to get hold of the movie, why they absolutely must watch it, and I believe they should, and how can they support you? What's going on?
Yeah.
How can they make Jay a part of their everyday life?
You can find me. Do you like that? Finding Jay, the name of the
Yeah.
documentary, Finding Jay. You can actually find me all the time on my website, jaybachochin.com. I'm sure Andy will put that in the link because it's
I
a
will.
very unique last name, just jaybachochin.com. You can also find me on Facebook. And on Facebook, I have a bunch of different pages of my research, of Finding Jay, my documentary. You can go on Amazon Prime to find Finding Jay. It's free to watch. I tell people, if it's saying Finding Jay, it's not about missing 411 and they found Jay.
Mm.
It's my journey into the world of Bigfoot and what it is and the experiences I've had that I will not throw Bigfoot in your face in this movie. At the same time, watch it with an open mind and just let the evidence lay where it lays, where it falls. Um, and pretty much, I'm always open. I always answer everybody's emails if they send them to me, messages, anything I could do to help out. I'd love to hear from you. So
That's great, Jay. And I will put all the links in the description for these clips as well. Jay, thank you so much for coming on. It's been too long in the waiting, but it was well worth waiting for. Buddy, thanks for coming.
thank you very much for having me on, Andy.
Take care. Bye.
All right, bye.